Hallo und willkommen zu einer neuen Folge des Tech- und Community Podcasts. In der heutigen Folge ist Tony Redmond zu Gast. Tony ist etwas wie das MVP-Urgestein für Exchange-Themen und ist seit mehr als 20 Jahren in der Welt von Microsoft Serverlösungen zu Hause. Heute sprechen wir aber nicht nur über Exchange, sondern auch über neueste Microsoft Cloud-Lösungen. Hello, Tony.
Hey, Thomas. Didn't understand a word you said, but there you are. It all sounded very good. I mean, you speak German very well.
I try my best. So
yeah, you've had lots of practice, which is good.
It's a pleasure to welcome you on my podcast.
Sure.
Can you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hello, I'm Tony Redmond.
Perfect. I think this is summarize it as quite a lot. So I already mentioned in the introduction that you are more or less the Tony Redmond. So pretty well known in the not only the Exchange community but in the Microsoft 365 world.
Well, I try.
So you are an advocate for M365 pretty much, and you publish a standard reference book on Microsoft 365 with a team of authors. So how do you handle the evergreen process for Microsoft 365 with so many updates each month?
Oh, well, with difficulty. I think it was a lot easier a few years ago because the changes were easier to understand. I mean, if somebody brings a fundamental change, well, one that's just happened is Teams is introducing the ability to forward chat messages. That's a very simple change to understand. Say, okay, I got a chat, I can now forward it. It can now create a new chat. Great, no problem there. Okay. But if you look at a lot of the changes that are coming in, especially in the compliance area, where Microsoft is twiddling the knobs to, obviously, as a response to particular requirements that customers are giving them, some of those changes are really very, very detailed changes. They're deep changes, and they're harder to understand unless you are very familiar with the content. So I think the answer to the question is we keep on trying. We do publish the book every month. Every month there are 23 content chapters, and I think every month 20 of those chapters on average are updated. And that gives you a flavor, if you will, of the kind of change across the entire ecosystem. It's not hard to find change inside Microsoft 365, that's for sure.
Yeah, totally agree. So I find it always overwhelming when I take a look into the message center within Microsoft 365 Admin Center, which is, to be honest, when I talk to clients, often totally ignored, which brings clients into the situation that they are that changes in the service come as a complete surprise to them. Do you think that the M365 Message Center is a good place to communicate changes?
Well, it's better than nothing. That's for sure. And if you think back, I think before 2017 or thereabouts, there wasn't a message center. So you found out about changes if a Microsoft development group wrote a blog. And some of the development groups are very good about writing up what they're doing. They're very good about understanding how customers use their software. And they're very good about understanding that their software isn't perfect and there are going to be some challenges that customers are going to have. But others aren't. Planner is dreadful. I think the Planner group is dreadful. I think the SharePoint group is pretty bad as well. I think Exchange has gotten worse over the years. I think Teams went through a phase of being very good. Now it's not so good again. I see the quality of the communication in the message center go down. I see that people obviously have rushed to compose messages. So they're not paying attention to the text and they're not reading through the text. And you see the obvious errors appearing and you wonder, you ask yourself, why does this happen? I mean, a very good example today or yesterday, there's this new feature again on Teams. I'm not going to pick on Teams, just a lot of change happens in Teams. So there's this new feature in Teams. Well, it's bringing back an old feature, which is that when you post a communication, an announcement in a channel, you're able to put a graphic on it to highlight the post and put a little bit of color in the list of threads, so people see, oh, this is an important thing. So last month they posted a message in the message center to say, "Yay, we're bringing it back. And guess what? You're going to be able to use Microsoft Designer to create artificial intelligence-based images." Great. Okay, that's not bad. You know, I use Microsoft Designer a lot, and it's really good at generating images. You know, which is good for people like me, who are very bad artists.
Okay.
So yesterday they posted another message center post, which had much the same text in it. It wasn't very different, but it contained one single change that was very, very important, where it says, oh, by the way, to use the artificial intelligence, you're going to need a Teams premium license. Now, what kind of customer communication is that, where you've got a message center post 3 weeks ago say, hey, great, you'll be able to use all this AI stuff. And then one coming, oh, yeah, you'll be able to use it if you've got a Teams premium license. It takes all of the goodness out of it. So I think it's like Microsoft is a very huge organization now, and there are hundreds and thousands of engineers who you might interact with over your career. I think many of those folks are just absolutely great when you talk to them one-to-one, but getting them to communicate to customers on an ongoing basis in a way that's very, very detailed. Not so detailed. I just want to know what's happening. Just tell me that. Don't put all this marketing BS in there. Just tell me what's happening, and I'll get on with life. And if they obeyed that simple message, things would be so much better. But they don't.
Yeah, I sometimes wish that there would be some kind of a quality gate before posting stuff to the message center, because I don't want to start picking on the Microsoft team as well, but mostly, especially the overall title of a message center post is does have a prefix named Microsoft Teams. Well, yeah, I know, because I've selected the service Microsoft Teams, right? So they are wasting quite a lot of text on those titles to make it, getting the obvious information across.
It's just difficult. But think of it yourself. If you're writing a blog post, or you're writing a book, you're writing a chapter, coming up with the chapter title is actually quite difficult at times. And I'm sure if you're a Microsoft program manager is trying to compose something like the title of a message center post that's going to tell everybody about a wonderful new feature, sometimes it's difficult.
Totally agreed. So, because you mentioned already the different product groups within Microsoft 365, do you think that the different product groups for the various workloads know what other product groups plan and do, and what the dependencies or constraints between the different workloads are?
No, they don't. They don't. And you can see this in the documentation. Now, Microsoft documentation has improved dramatically over the last 10 years. 10 years ago, when it came out of the... absolutely. Absolutely. 10 years ago, most of the product information that was available for the cloud servers came from the on-premises space and was full of errors. Now, I think it's fair to say that most of the documentation is okay. There are errors. There are very obvious errors, but at least you can go to GitHub and you can update those errors. You can tell them you got an error, so that's good. And generally speaking, I think a lot of the development groups have put some time into improving the quality of the work that they produce. However, the big issue I see with documentation, this speaks to the point you were making, where do the different development groups know about what each other is doing? If you look at the documentation, you see that the documentation is very intensely focused on just one product. So it doesn't think about, well, Teams, you're working with SharePoint, you're working with OneDrive, you're working with Exchange. So maybe you want to talk about the whole thing and maybe throw in a little bit of Enter ID as well, and maybe put in a little bit of Enter ID, advanced governance or whatever, because all of these things are what might happen inside a user scenario. A user doesn't just use Teams; they use the entire Microsoft 365 ecosystem. I think it's interesting that for their cross workload initiatives, they're much better. So some of the stuff that they're using for Copilot, for example, they're much better about saying, well, we got to make this work here, 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 and here. And so, for example, in compliance, they've said we've got to capture compliance records for Copilot prompts and responses. We've got to have audit records so that administrators can track how users are actually interacting with Copilot. We've got to have communications compliance capabilities so that somebody isn't using Copilot to say, design me the next atomic bomb or something like that, something ridiculous, but you get the idea. And it's interesting when you look at that kind of thing, you say, oh, okay, you guys can do it if you want to. But generally speaking, most of their work is very, very, very focused on what they do. And, I was a vice president in large American corporations for about 10 years or thereabouts. So I'm very familiar with a term called metrics drive behavior. So the metrics that are being placed on the managers of these groups, which then trickle down to all of their individual people, their individual contributors, are all intensely focused on their group, their work, their product, their software. So it's not very surprising that they're focused on those things and they're not focused on, well, let's work together across all of Microsoft 365. Now, there is one exception to the rule, and that's Exchange. Because right now there is no real Exchange Online product group. Exchange Online is just email services for the cloud. And there are individual function teams, like the guys who do email hygiene, the guys who handle all of the inbound traffic and stuff like that. But the old days when the Exchange used to have hundreds and thousands of engineers, tens of thousands of engineers working on the product, that's gone. They're not working on Exchange. They're working on the back end stuff. They're working on the substrate. They're working on all of the type of services that Exchange delivers to other products. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting because besides SharePoint, and having an Exchange Online mailbox is more or less the base foundation and one of the two base storage places for any kind of services information besides any kind of email. So especially, for example, the Copilot that you mentioned. So even Copilot now stores data in a user mailbox.
Well, there are three base places. There's Exchange, there's SharePoint, and SharePoint includes OneDrive.
All right.
You could also say that SharePoint includes syntax repository services, which is what Loop uses. And then the third one is Teams. Because that, if you think of those three major repositories are where Copilot or pretty well anything else inside Microsoft 365 gets its data. And you notice that there's been this huge shift away from workload-specific storage. So something like Whiteboard or Stream.
Yeah.
Stream is probably the best example. It's now all in ODSP or OneDrive and SharePoint.
Totally. Regarding, I want to come back to the overall evergreen process with Microsoft and all of the vast number of changes each week or each month. Do you think that Microsoft should move to a slower implementation cadence so that customers can deal better with the vast number of changes?
Yes, absolutely. I think I think Microsoft is still thinks it's fighting Google for.
Okay.
I still think it's fighting Google Apps or Google whatever workplace it's called at the moment,
Yeah. Okay.
and whatever Facebook you threatened to do about 6 or 7
Okay.
years ago and never did. I think they feel that they're still in this battle, but they're not. I would love if Microsoft would say, okay, we are going to go for a quarterly cadence of
Mm.
releases. And we're going to put all of our software together. We're going to test it all. Wouldn't testing be nice? Because
It,
testing isn't
it,
done in the cloud, or it doesn't seem to be done in the cloud. So we'll
no.
test everything to make sure it all works together. And then we'll release it in a quarterly release to customers. That would be wonderful.
That'd be a dream.
But we don't get to vote. And I don't know
No.
why they feel they have to do this. I don't see. I think it only makes it more difficult for their support team. It must be horrible being a Microsoft support engineer because you never know what the tenant is running
Yeah.
when somebody rings you up. Says, oh, I do this is my tenant, and the support engineer's thinking, I've never seen that before in my life. Where did you get that software? So it's absolutely horrible for them. It would be much, much better to say, no, we're going to stabilize. Even a monthly release would be good, but a quarterly would be so much better. And I don't think it would harm Microsoft in any way. They'll give you all this shite. Sorry, that's a bad word. You'll have to edit that out. They'll give you all this stuff about it will restrict our ability to innovate. And that's absolute rubbish. I would prefer if they innovated on the basis of stable, tested, and robust software rather than pushing stuff out when they think it's ready. And all too often it's not ready.
Yeah, and if they start rolling out stuff and it's not ready, or they see any kind of major issues, they even roll back the changes, which is even distracting for clients who already had that change.
Yep.
Because you mentioned testing, do you see in your space of work quite a lot of customers who do have an additional test tenant available besides the one they use for production?
Depends if they listen to me or not. If they listen to me, they have a development tenant. Absolutely.
Yeah, sounds familiar.
And any MVP or anybody else who's working as an independent consultant with Microsoft 365 should have a dev tenant as well. And they should make sure that they do some graph development work in it once every 90 days to keep that dev tenant alive and well. Absolutely. It's stupid if you don't have a dev tenant. Sorry. Did I call people stupid? You're not stupid if you don't have a dev tenant. You're just misinformed.
Yeah, so I totally agree. It's not being, stupid, but it's just, it's a risky thing to do to just configure it, because not each and every configuration thing can be easily be rolled back, to be honest. This is just risky. But let's talk about Microsoft 365 security for a moment. Because using a cloud services provider requires a lot of trust. Do you think that Microsoft is doing everything in its power to ensure the security of their cloud services?
Yes. Yes, and they do a much better job than most on-premises organizations. They have people who are very smart. They have as many resources as you would ever want to have. Any organization that can take in and deal with trillions of security events daily, they're a serious player in the security area. So yeah, I absolutely think that Microsoft is doing its level best, because when you think about it, this is a business critical issue for them. If Microsoft 365 is compromised, and it's compromised through a flaw in Microsoft's defenses, then that could have a very, very real effect on what is a huge business for them. Microsoft is now up at a run rate of over $120 billion a year for cloud services. For Microsoft 365, I think it's probably around 50% of that. So this is a very big sum of money, right? So they
Absolutely.
need to defend their business. And that's why you see things like recent campaigns like let's get rid of basic authentication for Exchange Online, which is absolutely the right thing to do. I wish it could be done for Exchange Server. That's why you see the campaign like let's get in multi-factor authentication. Let's make sure that every account is protected with multi-factor authentication. Last year, Alex Wainwright's a great guy. He's the vice president for identity security at Microsoft. He came to the experts conference in Atlanta, and he said, you know what? Only 26.18% of Entra ID customer accounts are protected with multi-factor authentication today. That's bad. But the fact that only 35% of administrator accounts are accounts that are holding at least one administrator role are protected with the MFA is even worse. So you can see that they're pumping a lot of effort into increasing the basic security stuff. And that means like using the right protocols, authenticating and securing the connections, handling the connections inside business more elegantly and more powerfully. I think they could do a little bit better. I would like to see, for example, that conditional access policies were available to all tenants and not just tenants with Entra ID premium. I'd like to see them I'd like to see all tenants being able to configure conditional access policies to meet their needs.
Yep.
But generally speaking, yeah, I think these guys are ultra serious, and I think they're doing a pretty good job.
Yep, I'm totally on this because you more or less answered the question that I had on my list. Well, because especially the currently running so-called MFA campaign to bring multi-factor authentication to end users and not only administrators is seen by some clients as, bring more inconvenience to their daily work. They are not necessarily seeing the security benefit. So that's pretty interesting.
Well, those people may not be wrong either. I worked with a very large American company that insists on resetting credentials every 5 days. So my guest account is protected by MFA, but every 5 days I'm thrown out of all of the web sessions I have with them, thrown out of all the team sessions I have with them. When I open a Word document to edit it, I am forced to re-authenticate again, and that to me is overdoing it. I think if you are protecting your tenant with MFA and everything is going well, then, why do you need to refresh all these sessions every 5 days? You're only getting into people's ways. And if you get into people's way, then you're going to reach a situation where people say, oh, this security is a pain in the ass. And I actually had a chance to talk to the chief security officer of this particular company, and I pointed out to him that, by the way, I'm also a guest in the Microsoft tenant, and they don't throw me out every 5 days. So, I mean, we're using the same technology. What's super secret about your stuff that, I have to be thrown out after 5 days? Anyway. With security, it's all about balance, right? All about balance.
Yeah, if you do not keep this in a balance, end users tend to use or to find some kind of a workaround if they can.
Yep.
Yeah. But let's switch over to Exchange. Do you think that there's still a demand for running Exchange server on premises?
I'm told there is. And when I go to conferences, I keep on meeting people who love running Exchange Server. I mean, when you think about it, Exchange Server is a phenomenal product. Any product that's been around for 27 years. Outlook is another one it's 26 years. But and it's certainly not the same Exchange as the software that Microsoft delivered as the touchdown product or Exchange 4.0 in 1996. But it's been around a long time. It's done a phenomenal work at the height of its power. Um, the estimates, and we have our estimates by industry analysts, said that Exchange Server catered for between 360 and 400 million mailboxes around the world. That's a lot of work. There's probably still, 50 million mailboxes on premises. Maybe. I don't know. But there's a lot of Exchange servers out there, because anytime there's a problem, you hear about it.
Yeah.
You hear about a lot of problems. You hear about, my gosh, I don't know. I mean, it's so easy to restrict PowerShell and Exchange, guys.
Yeah.
Why does a regular user need to use PowerShell on an Exchange server? I don't know. Admins do, absolutely, but regular users do not. Stop doing that. Anyway.
Anyway, so but quite a lot of customers who still run on-premises Exchange things.
Yeah, and a lot in Germany.
Yes, I know. Well, I'm currently pretty active in a few projects where, we do run, or there's a client that run on-premises Exchange, and I do want to switch over to a hybrid Exchange. So, because most of them, the customers use or run hybrid Exchange deployments, especially with centralized mail flow. Because they think they do need to be in charge or in control of the security gateway for inbound emails, because they use appliances or software solutions. There's something that we call a two-vendor strategy, so that you use security solutions from not only one vendor, which would be the case when running Exchange Online as an entry point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I get this. The folks, the ISVs who run mail hygiene services got a very nice business, routing messages through their services and back into Exchange Online. I get this, but I also ask people who are doing that, so when you buy electricity from the power company, do you insist on running the electricity down through your own wires just to make sure that you're in control of the current?
That's a pretty interesting comparison, to be honest. Because especially when running Exchange Online. Yeah, I totally agree. Because especially putting something in front of Exchange Online, so not only, as you mentioned, having an additional security solution in Exchange Online, so using some kind of a transport rule-based in and out construct, which you can do it, but doesn't make sense.
Actually, water was probably a better analogy, because when you think about it, some people do filter the water that comes in off the public supply before they drink it. So that's perfectly reasonable to do. But another question I ask, and the ISVs hate when I ask this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Say, okay, you spend X $1,000s a year with this ISV to do mail hygiene, and that's fantastic. You get, this benefit of a dual vendor approach and all the rest of it. If you spent the same amount of money, would you be able to upgrade the security of your Microsoft 365 tenant by a significant amount? And I'm not just thinking about Exchange. But I'm thinking about, if you went to Defender Plan 2 and you got all sorts of things like threat hunting and whatnot in there, would that be a good thing? I mean, because you're spending this money outside rather than outside the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, instead of spending it inside and taking advantages of maybe some of the offers that you will get from Microsoft. Now, I will argue against myself as well by saying that it's also a very bad idea to put everything into one basket. So I think this is a very difficult thing for companies to resolve. In some cases, it's because it's the particular skill sets that exist within the company. They know, for example, Mimecast. They have used Mimecast for the last 20 years or whatever, however long Mimecast has been around. Therefore, they know how to run Mimecast really well. Those guys will be very difficult to move across to a pure Exchange Online solution. Absolutely, I understand that. You can't throw away years and years of experience without good reason. But there are lots of other customers out there who aren't in that type of situation. And those folks, I sometimes wonder, would they be better off inside the tent and spending their money on getting advanced features like Defender Plan 2? I don't know. As I say, it's a discussion to have with every customer.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because the thing is that sometimes I'm completely surprised because some clients even have advanced technologies available as part of their active and paid licenses, but they still prefer to have a third-party solution in front of others, and then they just leave the feature they have unused, which is,
Does everybody use every feature in Microsoft 365?
Not necessarily every feature, but when it comes to a security solution that I have licensed, I'm paying for, so I'm paying double. So
okay, but how many service plans do you think are in something like Microsoft 365 E5?
How many licenses are features
service
are
plans.
in there?
Service
plans.
Yeah.
I think the M365 E5 is, I don't know the exact number for that second, but I think that you are currently looking at it.
I'm not.
Looks to okay, but
I can guess. I mean, I'd guess there's probably between 55 and 60.
Yeah.
And a service plan is a way of licensing a particular set of technologies. So the point is that even the Office 365 E3 with license, which was the, if you like, the default enterprise license for years and years and years. Microsoft would like everybody to be using Microsoft 365 E3 or E5 instead.
Yeah.
But there's still lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of customers with the Office 365 E3. That has gone from something like 25 to 33 or thereabout service plans. So the point is that there's lots and lots and lots of technology that people have, and whether they're paying for it and using everything or not, does that matter as long as they think they're getting value?
I don't know. So I definitely see a difference depending on the clients. If you're talking about clients in the enterprise or public sector or non-profits, all of the three, for example, do have a different point of view on security features and paying for them.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I get it.
Right. Another topic regarding Exchange servers. So the last cumulative update introduced or started to bring us something called the on-premises only modern authentication.
Yeah.
With ADFS, so with Active Directory Federation Services.
Yeah.
Do you see Active Directory Federation Services still widely in use?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't do a lot of work with Exchange server customers anymore. I do very little work with them, so I don't have an answer for that question. I guess they must be because why would Microsoft select that particular piece of software unless it was something that is in reasonable use? One of the things you've always got to think about with Microsoft is that they're very data-driven. So when they make a decision about what to do, what route to take in software development, they're going to go with what the data tells them. So if the data tells them that, the combination of customers that got the latest version of Outlook Perpetual, Exchange 2019, running on Windows Server 2012, whatever it is, or something, da 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 da, is 53% of the total base that we can address. That's exactly what they're going to go for. And that's a reasonable thing. Data-driven decisions are good generally. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But because I definitely get the point that the overall idea is to get rid of legacy authentication methods with Exchange Server in an on-premises only environment where you do not have the possibility to use hybrid modern with Entra ID. But nevertheless, the ADFS product itself it's still a role even within Windows Server 2022. But due to personal experience, I can say that the Active Directory Federation Services documentation is just plain old. So it's mostly 2016 related, and they just updated. Yeah, it's the same for 2019 and 2022 and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, it sounds like somebody hasn't been paying attention to that particular software.
Yeah, but I do want to get started with on ADFS. Let's stay for the last question regarding Exchange Server. So, some administrators feel bullied by Microsoft to use the latest Exchange versions. So, keyword here is the blocking of inbound SMTP connections from old Exchange servers to Exchange Online. Do you think that this is kind of a bullying by Microsoft?
No, I think they're struggling with how best to protect their infrastructure, and they're struggling against a habit which, for whatever reason, was allowed to develop over the years. People just did not upgrade. They didn't apply service packs. They didn't apply cumulative updates. They stayed running old versions of Exchange for longer than they should have. Now, there were many reasons why this happened. Hardware was one. The fact that you needed new hardware to upgrade, that was one. The state of the software was another. There were a couple of Exchange server releases that came out and were just plain bad. And so everybody said, don't ever install new software until somebody else has installed it and found all the bugs, and Microsoft has fixed those bugs. So there was that. But generally, I think we got ourselves into a position where there are too many Exchange servers out there that are running very old software. And so you get now into a situation where that the bad guys are looking for those servers. That the bad guys are looking to penetrate those servers. That the bad guys can penetrate those servers because those servers have not been patched for a very long time. So would you allow vulnerable servers like that to connect to your cloud? And that's the discussion that's happening, for example, around the mail connector issue, where Microsoft is now blocking Exchange 2007. And it's about to go to 2010 servers. And they're doing it for very simple reasons, because an attacker can go and penetrate one of those systems. It can infect one of those systems. And the system can then send messages into Exchange Online. And because they go across one of these internal connectors, which are trusted, right?
That's important.
The mail comes in. It's not going to be subject to any sort of mail hygiene checks. It's from my buddy over there. I know that person well. That Exchange server over there, great guy, no problem. So I'll accept it. So I guess Microsoft have a choice. They could either impose mail hygiene checks across those internal connectors, which means that they're not internal connectors anymore. It's just like all mail is being dealt with externally, which is a change to the way the mail routing works today. Or they could just take this decision and say, hey, guess what? We're not going to allow you to connect really old servers to Exchange Online. And I think the decision they took is a valid decision. I really do. I don't have a problem with it at all.
Okay, so I do have one very last question that I do ask all my guests in my podcast.
Okay.
Which is, how did you find your way into IT and doing the stuff that you do today?
How did I find my way into IT? I went into a computer room.
Perfect.
And I
so already back at school days, or?
No. I joined a bank. And went to a computer center, the Bank of Ireland, and saw all these computers and said, "Oh, that's what I want to do." And they were type of. I think the first mainframe I worked on had 192K core, and it was the old core. It was the little bits of iron, balls, threaded on. Yeah, and I remember when one of those. That was a 1904S. An ICL 1904S computer running the George 3 operating system. I remember when the bank removed that computer, so much gold was found. Because everything in those days, all of the connectors were gold to make sure that the connection was as good as possible. It was, I went from that into VAXs and then up to PCs and all that sort of stuff. There you are.
Awesome. Okay. Tony, thank you very much for being a guest on my podcast. Thank you.
No problem, Thomas. Talk to you again.
Die Links zu den Social-Media-Profilen von Tony und seinen Blogs und zum Hauptwerk rund um Microsoft 365 findet ihr im Blogartikel zu dieser Episode unter podcast.granicus.eu. Bis zum nächsten Mal beim Tech- und Community-Podcast. Ciao.